So way back in 2011, BlackBerry users could finally get in on the tablet craze with the release of the PlayBook, a 7-inch $500 tablet that went head-to-head with the iPad 2. But unfortunately for Research in Motion, it wasn't nearly as well received, and the company ended up slashing the price just months later, before essentially killing it off in 2013. But the whole story is a little more complicated than that, so today we're going to dive into the history of this thing and see if it really was as bad as everybody said. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. So we've kind of been on a roll with old tablet content recently, and I've gotten a few requests from you guys to make a video on the BlackBerry PlayBook. So I picked this one up on eBay not too long ago. It's the 16GB Wi-Fi model, which is the baseline, but the storage on these things went up to 64GB, and the pricing on each was identical to the comparable iPad 2 model. So we'll go ahead and crack the box open here to see what you would have gotten if you decided to pick one of these up back then. So inside, of course, we have the BlackBerry PlayBook itself. We'll set this aside and come back to it a bit later. And right here you got a free accessory that did not come with the iPad 2. This is a carrying pouch. It provides a really snug fit for the PlayBook. I mean, that just is kind of how these pouches are in my experience. It takes a little bit of effort to get it in and out, but I mean, once it's in there, it ain't coming out unless you really want it to. So that's a nice inclusion. And then underneath here, of course, we're going to have all of your typical accessories. So we have your power adapter and your USB cable to connect it up to your computer, and you have your documentation in here, as well as a brand new, never been used polishing cloth. This right here is a $19 value, people, and I'm sure Apple would charge like $50 for this case, so at least you're getting some nice extras here with the PlayBook. If we take a closer look at the hardware, one thing I'll say is this is definitely a premium feeling device, certainly compared to that Kobe Kairos tablet that I explored back in this video. It's got a nice design. The back of it has this nice rubberized texture that's very comfortable to hold in your hands. You have a rear-facing camera as well as a front-facing camera, and you can probably tell from the orientation of the BlackBerry logo down here that this was primarily meant to be used in landscape. So you have all of your buttons on the top of the device. So you've got volume up and down, and the middle one there is your play pause button. You have your power button here. There's also a headphone jack over here on the right side. Now, one thing that I saw in a few of the reviews that I read that was a common criticism is the size of this power button. You can see it is very small. It's also not as raised as these other buttons here, making it a little bit harder to press. I've found that I kind of got to use my fingernail to get in there to press that, and that is the only way to turn on and off the screen, so you can't like tap the screen or press any of these other buttons in some sort of combination. So yeah, you do kind of have to feel around for it up here and use a good amount of effort to press it. So yeah, that was a common complaint that I saw. On the bottom here are all of your ports. So we have micro HDMI, definitely a leg up over the iPad, micro USB for data transfer and charging, as well as an additional docking connector here for use with RIM's charging pod stand. And then, of course, you have your 7-inch 1024 by 600 display, which could have been a Pro or a Con, depending on what you were in the market for. The iPad 2 did have a larger 9.7-inch display, but at a similar resolution, meaning that the pixel density here on the PlayBook is a little bit better. So if you wanted a smaller device that's easier to carry around with you, the PlayBook might have been the better choice, especially if you were an existing BlackBerry user. And speaking of users, I've been a user of the MaxDock Thunderbolt 5 docking station from today's video sponsor Ugrain, because it's been a really nice upgrade to my desk setup. I use a MacBook Pro as my daily editing system, so having the dock's 17 expansion ports available to me is extremely convenient. It has practically everything I need since it's one of the most port-rich models available. Its two Thunderbolt 5 ports provide extremely fast data transfer up to 120 gigabits per second, which will let you transfer a 6 gigabyte 4K video file in about 1 second. It's also got DisplayPort, USB-A, USB-C, SD and microSD card slots, audio jacks, as well as a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet jack. And this model takes it a step further by including a built-in NVMe PCIe Gen 4 M2 slot, which is rare among similar products, and it allows me to easily expand my laptop storage while still getting super fast transfer speeds. And what's great is all of this plugs into my computer with a single Thunderbolt cable, while charging it at the same time with its 240 watt power supply. I currently use this setup with two 1080p displays, but it can support dual 6K monitors or a single 8K monitor running at 60Hz. And it can also be used as a central charging hub for all of your devices, all while maintaining a comfortable feel that doesn't get extremely hot to touch even after a day of use thanks to its advanced thermal design. And it works great with the newest MacBooks. Right now you can pick up one of these docks for 22% off just by clicking the link down below, so be sure to check it out, and huge thanks again to you, Green, for making this video possible. Now, during my research on this thing, I've come to the conclusion that RIM designed the playbook with only BlackBerry users in mind, which may not sound like a bad thing at all, but the key word there is only. If you had a BlackBerry phone, this thing worked great with it. It could link up to it over RIM's bridge software to pull your emails, your address book, your calendar, and even BBM conversations to the playbook. But for some strange reason, RIM did not include native apps for any of these features on the tablet. So if you didn't have a BlackBerry phone, you couldn't even access your email on this thing, unless of course you wanted to log into webmail in the web browser. And this is completely ridiculous considering that RIM called the playbook the world's first professional-grade tablet, a professional-grade tablet that didn't have native email functionality. I mean, are you kidding me? That is utterly insane. Now, to be fair to Research in Motion, they did add all of these features, well, except for BBM, we'll get to that in a moment, to the playbook in a later software update. But the problem was, that didn't come out until February 2012, which was almost a year after the playbook was released. And this was despite the fact that they promised this update in the summer of 2011 initially. So, for that entire time, it was a pretty big turnoff. If you wanted a tablet that could check your email and like notify you whenever you got a new message or view your calendar without needing to already have a BlackBerry phone, those were all major reasons not to buy the playbook. Another notable thing introduced in this software update was Android app support. So yeah, the playbook could actually run some Android applications. Developers did have to repackage and re-sign their applications and then release them in the BlackBerry World Marketplace. The problem was, this only ever supported Android 2.3 applications, which was already an outdated version of Android by this point. It also wasn't a version of Android even meant for tablets in the first place. Honeycomb was out, as well as Ice Cream Sandwich, but I mean, those apps were not supported on this thing, so it was only ever Android 2.3, and it was only ever the developers who wanted to go through the process of releasing the app in the BlackBerry World Marketplace. But even with those limitations, that did open up a whole new category of applications that could run on this thing. But by that point, I personally think it was too little too late. And there's a lot to talk about on the demise of the BlackBerry playbook, and we'll go into that later on in the video. But for now, I want to go through a little bit of a software demo on this thing and show you how it compared to iOS at the time. So I think that one of the biggest features that BlackBerry Tablet OS had over the iPad's operating system was real multitasking capabilities. So if I were to go ahead and launch the browser, for instance, you can see that for a split second there, we get this like multitasking cards interface that, if you're a former WebOS user, might give you a little bit of deja vu, because yeah, it does look kind of similar. And since there is no home button on this thing, all of your navigation is going to be done through gestures. So if I swipe up from the bottom of the screen, it will bring us back to this multitasking cards UI. And then from here, I get access to this dock that I can pin things to launch other applications. So say I open up the clock there, I can swipe out of this and get back to the browser and just, swipe between all the applications that I've got open. If I want to open up the calendar, we can do that, swipe out of this, and then slide through here. You can also, if you're in an application, you can swipe from the left and right side of the screen to easily switch between your opened apps. So I I can go from the calendar to the clock, back to the browser, swipe up from here. Maybe I want to close out of the calendar and the clock. I can do that. And then I can tap on this arrow here to get to my full list of applications. Like I said, this dock is customizable, so if I want to tap and hold on one of these icons, maybe take the calendar off and bring the file manager up to here, you can do that. I can also make folders. Maybe I want to move the calendar and the calculator into a folder. I just drag one on top of the other, make the folder. You just tap anywhere blank on the screen to get out of the apps modification view. And maybe I want to go into the folder and launch the calculator, and then, get out of this, go back down here, and then get out of the folder. It's a very simple and easy interface to navigate around in. Now, in terms of what applications come pre-installed on this thing, I feel that a lot of them, like the clock and the camera, are pretty self-explanatory, and unfortunately things like the BlackBerry World Marketplace don't work anymore since all of those online services have been shut down. So we can't really do anything in here. It doesn't show you any of the applications that were once in here, but this is where you would go if you wanted to download third-party software. But that being said, there is still a way to sideload some applications onto here, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But there are a couple of applications that I would like to demonstrate that would make this an attractive purchase for a business professional. One of those is Docs2Go, which allowed you to create and modify Word, Excel, and PowerPoint documents. Now, for some reason, we don't have the create option for a PowerPoint file down here, only for Word and Excel, but you can copy over a PowerPoint. So I've got this one right here, and if you open it, not only can you view it, but you can also make edits to it as well. So if I wanted to tap on here and maybe highlight this text and make it bold, I think you just have to, we'll just do that. And let's tap bold. I can italicize and underline it, and there you go. And yeah, I mean, so you can totally edit this, but you can't seem to create one from just this main screen here. But obviously, one of the major things that you would probably use this for would be giving a PowerPoint presentation. So you can do that by tapping on this, and then it brings up your slides in a full screen view. I can go through them here. And then obviously you could hook up the PlayBook to an HDMI display and, give your presentation that way. So yeah, we'll get out of this and slide back over to our documents to go. And you see I've got a Excel document and a couple of Word files. Maybe I want to just make a new one, so I'll just tap on new there. For the Word document, it'll bring us up over here. I can type out, whatever I want, and then we can go to close and save as, and then type it in here. We'll just call this test, save. And then we go back here and it will add test.doc. You could also browse down here and it brings up your file browser. This is also a separate application. You can see it separates your files by different categories. So we've got pictures, video, music, and documents. So maybe I want to browse to word.doc and open that up, and it will slide over to the document viewer and display that for us. So yeah, that's definitely a nice feature. We can go back here to our home screen. They did also bundle Adobe Reader with this, so you can just view PDFs. There's actually a starter in here as well for the Print to Go feature. Now, this is a separate application right here, and what this allowed you to do was print, quote unquote, from your computer to the BlackBerry PlayBook, and it was basically just a way of copying files over to here. So what you would do is install a Windows driver on your computer, go to whatever document you wanted to print, and then select Print to Go as the printer, and then it would, copy everything over to here wirelessly. So that was a pretty cool feature. It kind of talks about that here, what you're supposed to do. Here's a link to the software. And then you see we don't actually, or it shows one new document in here. Oh, that's just the getting started PDF file, which we already had open. So yeah, this just gives you instructions here. So that's kind of a nice feature, if you were in a situation where you wanted to quickly get something over to your PlayBook without plugging it into your computer and, going into the BlackBerry software and doing a sync. You could just copy over something that way very easily. Now, you've probably noticed that we do have the contacts and the messages and the calendar programs on here, and that's because this is running a later version of the operating system where RIM had brought all of those apps over to here natively. So by this point, you didn't have to use the BlackBerry Bridge software and have a BlackBerry phone to get access to all that stuff. And if I wanted to, I could go into messages here, and if I had an email account signed in and working on here, we could pull in all of our messages. Since I don't, it's going to come up with this pop-up. We'll say setup now. That will bring down the settings application, and I could go in here and sign into whatever account that I wanted. And there's an advanced setup where you can specify, whatever account that you're using. And by the way, this is what the settings app looks like. You get access to this by tapping this gear icon at the top right in your little notification area there. So I can go and view the about info. We can get access to whatever Wi-Fi network you want to connect to, check for software updates, sign in with your BlackBerry ID. There's also HDMI settings, there's security settings if you want to add a password or enable developer mode, all that good stuff. So we'll get out of this and go back to our apps view. Now there's a couple applications I haven't tried out yet. I'm curious to see if the weather program still works and is able to pull weather information. So why don't we set New York as our home city. It doesn't look like it's populating with anything, so that no network connection. So we are on Wi-Fi, as you can see up here. So that is just probably because whatever service this uses is not working anymore. I'm curious, maybe we can try zip codes. Let's do 10001 and hit enter. Yeah, no network connection. So it's just not working. I think that is going to be the case with the vast majority of the very network dependent applications. Let's try YouTube and see if this is able to do anything. So it does bring us to an interface here. Can we view featured stuff? Yeah, it's not looking like it. Top rated, most viewed, recent videos. Of course, not going to be anything in there. Can we do a search for MJD? Let's see if it does anything. No search suggestions, and yeah, it doesn't look like it's actually working. So that's unfortunate. So the YouTube app is non-functional. I know that the music store doesn't work anymore. Probably no surprise there, just like the BlackBerry App World Marketplace. So yeah, we'll go ahead and just agree to this and come in here, and yeah, it just doesn't pull anything at all. So can't really do anything from there. Some other things you have a voice notes application for, doing voice memos. So this will still work. I could just start recording there and, talk and whatever. We can pause and stop that. And then there you go. There's your voice note. Pretty self-explanatory. And then we've got podcast. We've got a video chat software. This is probably not going to work anymore either, but we can see what the interface looked like anyway. Or maybe not, because it's going to ask us immediately to sign in with a BlackBerry ID. Oh, never mind. There we go. Yeah, so here's the interface. You see we get a view of the front camera. You could call people if you had their contact information. You can add contacts down here. We'll just get out of that. And then I think, can you switch your camera? Maybe not. Okay, you can just turn on your front camera, but there doesn't seem to be a way to swap to the back if you wanted to. Not that you would really need to for a video call, but you can turn your camera off if you just want to use your microphone only. So yeah, you got video chatting, and you also have this Need for Speed Undercover. The only thing is, I don't know if this was included on every BlackBerry playbook that was sold in stores, but I do know that it was used for demonstration purposes because I have this sales deck here that was given out to retail salespeople by RIM, and there is this section back here that talks about gaming, and they give you two options to show to the customer. You've got Tetris and Need for Speed. So we can go ahead and open this thing up, and we'll take a look at, how it worked on this thing. Apparently this is optimized for the BlackBerry playbook, so that's cool, I guess. Okay, so we get a list of cars that we can buy. It looks like a lot of these are going to be locked, and we have $25,000, so that means we could spend all of it on the Mazda Speed 3, or get the Pontiac Firebird or the Nissan 240SX. I guess this is $10,000. Why don't we just do that? And yeah, we'll make this purchase. So there we go. And then I guess there's going to be like a map with like, what is this here? Quick race. We've got, okay, what's the race map? All right, let's see here. So we're just gonna, so does it accelerate? Yeah, so it's constantly accelerating and then you just hold on the screen to brake. But yeah, it's just really sensitive. Like, I guess that's just how it is. You know, you just have to be very, very precise with it. I mean, I could get used to this if I wasn't holding the tablet with my hands resting on the table underneath. It's not really how you're supposed to play this game, but, you know, it like sort of works, just not very well. But anyways, yeah, so that is Need for Speed Undercover, and then like I mentioned, the other game in here was Tetris. So I guess maybe some of them had that on it. I just found this and sideloaded it, which that was a bit of a process. And what was even more of a process was getting this thing to actually boot to the home screen. Because like I mentioned earlier, BlackBerry shut down the services for these older operating systems back in 2022. And since this tablet was reset to factory settings before it was sold to me, it meant that it could not load the license agreement file that you have to agree to be able to get past the initial setup. Now, I was able to find a couple workarounds for this, the most recent being published on Reddit back in February of this year, which details how to get root access on this thing. But you only have to go through step 1 of this post, which involves flashing the tablet with a modified firmware version that bypasses the initial setup. It's also worth noting that even though the guide doesn't mention it, you need to have BlackBerry Link installed on your computer, or at the very least the drivers it comes with for this to work properly. But once I did that, the tablet booted right up, and I immediately noticed that a lot of the default applications were missing. Now, it appears that this was intentionally done to remove a lot of the apps like BlackBerry World and some of these other really network-dependent ones that just don't work anymore. But of course, I wanted to show them to you here, so I had to find a way to sideload a bunch of these apps back onto the Playbook. And I found another Reddit post that details 3 ways to do that. I was only able to get option 3 to work, which uses a Chrome extension of all things. I had to install a super old version of Chrome to get it to work properly, but it was able to connect to my Playbook over the network and then get a list of every app on the device. And all you have to do is just drag the bar file of the app you want to install into the browser window and it begins installing. So I was able to get some of these default applications from an Internet Archive listing, and then I found some third-party ones from playbookbarfiles.com, which is a pretty self-explanatory name for a website. Now, some of these may have been Android applications originally. I wasn't really able to tell, but you can't just like load APKs onto this thing. They have to be re-signed as a bar file, and like I mentioned earlier, the developer would have to, you know, re-release it in the BlackBerry World App Store Marketplace thing. So we've got Angry Birds. We'll go ahead and open this up. Let's see how good at Angry Birds that I am. So we'll go ahead and do that. That was a pretty bad shot, wasn't it? Let's try again, maybe. Okay, that was a little bit better. So I'll take that. We'll go to the next level. And we'll just do this other one. I mean, this is Angry Birds. You guys have seen it a million times before, I'm sure. So... oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Okay, that was actually a little bit better than I thought. Can we get the third one there? No, not looking like it. Oh, he's moving. Oh, shoot. We got him. All right. That's pretty sweet. Let's see if we can get this last one. Oh my god. Really? That was a terrible shot. I got to aim way higher. All right. I'll take that. So, yeah, it's Angry Birds, and it might have been just ported over from Android to the BlackBerry Playbook. Now, Tetris here, I believe this is the same Tetris that is mentioned in the little sales deck here. Unfortunately, there's not like a screenshot of it. They just say Game Demo Tetris, but they just have like a generic shot of the tablet with the app switcher open, and none of those apps running are Tetris. So this, however, does take place in portrait mode. So let me readjust the camera here a little bit, and we'll just do let's do some quick play. So yeah, Tetris. And now that we're in portrait mode, you swipe up like that. You can see the interface is going to be a little bit different here, a lot more crammed. We don't actually have that arrow over here. You have to just swipe up from the bottom to get back to your apps. And I'll go ahead and bring this back into landscape. And then we got this one here, Sonic 4 Ep1. I just grabbed this because it looked interesting. This very well could be an Android port as well. Splash Hill Zone Act 1, the adventure begins. Okay, so I'm guessing, okay, that's jump. This is your little, yeah. So we're gonna move like that. Yeah, it's Sonic, guys. Oh my gosh, isn't that cool? Sonic the Hedgehog on the BlackBerry Playbook, and I'm not really good at these touch controls, I gotta be honest with you. I much prefer playing with a physical controller. But, I mean, you could make this work. So yeah, that's a little demo there of a few games on this thing, and that sound is taking a while to quit. I think this was able to handle all of these games pretty well, and I think that overall, the software on this thing is pretty good. This is not a bad product at all, but it still was a complete failure, and now we're going to get into why that was. So it doesn't really have much to do with the hardware being bad or the software being terrible. One of the big problems, of course, and I hate to always go back to this, but there is the Apple issue. The iPad 2 was a more popular device, it was a more established platform, there were way more applications available for it, and it was the exact same price. So the fact that the Playbook cost the exact same amount as the iPad 2 didn't set it up for success right out of the gate. Then there was also the problem we already talked about, how there were no native email, calendar, contacts, or messaging programs natively on the Playbook from the very beginning. And they didn't get added until version 2.0 of the software came out in February 2012, even though that RIM originally said it was going to come in the summer of 2011. And that gets us into another major problem, the fact that there were just a lot of empty promises with this thing. Not only was version 2.0 delayed so much, but RIM originally said it was going to come with BBM support. That didn't happen. Then they said that was going to be added in a future release, but it never did. BlackBerry Messenger was never added on this thing. And then when BlackBerry 10 launched in 2013, which was supposed to be like the revival of BlackBerry, it was a complete rework of the operating system, implementing some of the stuff from BlackBerry Tablet OS, and combining what were two separate operating systems into like one that was going to run on both smartphones and tablets. Well, there was going to be a version of that released for the Playbook to bring this tablet into like the next generation of BlackBerry. But then 5 months later, they backtrack and said, oh, sorry, we're not actually going to be releasing BlackBerry 10 for the Playbook. And with the exception of an alpha development build that you can find online, there was never a supported release of BlackBerry 10 for the Playbook, and that probably has to do a lot with the fact that by November of 2011, Research in Motion had lost $486 million, due in large part to how poor that the Playbook was selling. So they were forced to implement price cuts to try and sell off their unsold inventory in a really unorthodox way, though. The month that they announced that major loss, they dropped prices to starting at $199 for the 16GB model for a limited time. Then in January of 2012, they dropped pricing for all models, regardless of storage capacity, to $299 through February 4th. And then on February 5th, 2012, they dropped the 16GB price to $199, the 32GB price to $249, and the 64GB price kept at that $299 price that it was set at in January. And keep in mind, this was all done before the 2.0 update that brought the email and the calendar and the contact stuff to the Playbook. So even though that, kind of like with the HP touchpad, this did help to increase people's interest in the Playbook and give it a boost in sales, it ultimately didn't help the company in the long run, and I suspect that that's why they went back on a lot of the promises they made for the Playbook and effectively killed off the tablet in 2013. Now, I say effectively because they didn't completely stop supporting the thing. It wasn't sold in stores anymore, and it never saw any more OS updates, but it wasn't until 2022 when it actually reached end of life, as all BlackBerry legacy services were discontinued that year. And yeah, if you're wondering, BlackBerry is still around. I don't think their name gets mentioned a whole lot these days, but they dropped the Research in Motion name in 2013, and now they operate as a software company focusing on secure communications, and also own the QNX operating system that the PlayBook's OS was based on. And these days, QNX sees a lot of modern use in cars. There's estimated to be over 275 million vehicles on the road today from a variety of different automakers that utilize a QNX-based system as they become a lot more dependent on software. But yeah, there you have it. That is a little look back at the BlackBerry Playbook. Definitely a fascinating device. It's interesting to think of what this could have been had they, maybe priced it a little bit better and had all of these features from the very beginning. I think maybe it could have been a real serious competitor to the iPad, but unfortunately, we will never really know. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely be sure to give it a thumbs up, get subscribed, maybe consider becoming a patron or a channel member to get early access to these videos before anybody else. But either way, I just want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.